A former slot technician just told me something about Bull Rush that casinos have been trying to keep quiet, and what he revealed could completely change how you think about slot machines. His name is Mark, and he spent 7 years working on casino floors in Las Vegas, servicing machines, reviewing performance reports, and watching patterns that most players never get to see. What he shared with me about Bull Rush isn't just interesting, it's the kind of information that makes casino management very uncomfortable. Because here's the thing, when a slot technician starts noticing that one particular machine consistently shows numbers that break every standard rule about how casinos make money, that's when you need to pay attention. And Bull Rush breaks those rules in ways that are going to shock you. Let me tell you what Mark discovered when he started reviewing the monthly revenue reports at his property. Every slot machine on a casino floor gets analyzed obsessively. Casinos track everything: how much money goes in, how much comes out, how long players stay, how often bonuses trigger, and most importantly, what percentage the house is keeping. It's called hold percentage, and it's the number that determines whether a machine stays on the floor or gets replaced. Mark told me that when he first started looking at Bull Rush performance data, something seemed off. The hold percentage was lower than almost every other machine in its class. Not just slightly lower, significantly lower. According to the internal reports he reviewed, Bull Rush was consistently showing return to player rates between 92 and 94%. Now, before you think that sounds normal, let me explain why that number made Mark do a double take. The industry standard for most popular slot machines, especially the ones you see taking up prime real estate on casino floors, runs between 86 and 89% return to player. Buffalo Machines, Lightning Link, Dragon, Link, most of the games that casinos push heavily, they're all sitting in that range. But Bull Rush was running 4 to 6 percentage points higher? Mark said he actually went back through 6 months of data because he thought there might be an error in the reporting system. There wasn't. Month after month, Bull Rush was returning more money to players than virtually any comparable machine on the property. Here's why that matters more than you might realize. That difference of 4 to 6 percentage points translates to real money over the course of a playing session. If you're sitting down with $300, that percentage difference could mean the gap between your money lasting 2 hours or 4 hours. It's the difference between getting entertainment value and getting drained. And according to Mark, casino management noticed this too. He told me about meetings where floor managers specifically discussed Bull Rush performance, and the tone wasn't positive. They weren't happy that this machine was underperforming from a revenue perspective, but they kept it on the floor anyway for reasons that are going to become very clear. But here's what makes this even more significant. The RTP percentage is just the foundation. What Mark revealed about the bonus trigger frequency is where this story gets really interesting, because Bull Rush doesn't just return more money overall. It does something with bonus triggers that defies everything you've been conditioned to expect from modern slot machines. And wait until you hear what former employees discovered about how often those bonuses actually hit, compared to the games casinos want you playing instead. Before I get into what Mark told me about those bonus triggers, I need to ask you something. Have you ever played Bull Rush? Did you notice anything different about how often the bonuses seem to hit? Drop a comment below and let me know what your experience was. And if you're finding this information valuable, go ahead and subscribe, because what former slot employees have revealed gets even more interesting. But right now, let me tell you about the conversation Mark had with his floor supervisor that started to explain why casino management was so frustrated with this particular machine. Mark said that about 4 months into reviewing Bull Rush data, his supervisor Sarah pulled him aside after a weekly performance meeting. Sarah had been working in casino operations for over 12 years, and Mark told me she had a reputation for knowing the numbers cold. She managed a section of the slot floor that included about 40 machines, everything from penny slots to high-limit games, and she knew exactly which machines were performing and which ones weren't. According to Mark, Sarah was visibly annoyed when she started talking about Bull Rush. She told him that she'd been getting questions from upper management about why that particular machine was generating so much playtime but such relatively low hold percentages. The casino knew players loved it. They could see people sitting at Bull Rush for hours, but the revenue numbers didn't match what they expected. Here's what Sarah shared with Mark that day, and this is where the bonus trigger frequency comes into the picture. She'd been tracking player sessions across different machines, timing how long it took for bonuses to trigger, and what she found with Bull Rush didn't align with industry standards. According to her observations and the data she'd compiled, Bull Rush was triggering its bonus round approximately once every 80 to 100 spins. Mark said when Sarah told him that number, he immediately understood why management was concerned. Because the industry average for most popular slot machines, the ones that generate serious revenue for casinos, sits somewhere around one bonus trigger every 150 to 200 spins. Think about what that actually means when you're sitting at a machine. If you're playing at a moderate pace, maybe 500 spins per hour, and you're on a machine with standard trigger frequency, you might see two, maybe three bonus rounds in an hour of play. But on Bull Rush, with its documented trigger rate, you could be looking at 5 or 6 bonus rounds in that same hour. That's not a small difference. That's the gap between feeling like you're constantly chasing something that never comes and actually experiencing regular bonus action that keeps the game engaging. Mark told me that Sarah had compared Bull Rush trigger rates against several of the most popular machines on her floor. Buffalo Lightning Link, Dragon Link, and Bull Rush was consistently hitting bonuses nearly twice as frequently. Now, here's where this gets really interesting, and it's something a player named Jennifer actually documented. Mark told me about Jennifer because she became somewhat famous among the staff at his casino. She was a regular player who did something most people don't do. She kept detailed records. Jennifer would come in with a set bankroll, play Bull Rush specifically, and track every single session on a spreadsheet. She recorded how many spins between bonuses, how much each bonus paid, what her ending bankroll was, everything. After about 3 months of this, Jennifer actually approached Sarah on the floor and showed her the data. Mark said Sarah was impressed because Jennifer's personal tracking almost perfectly matched what the casino's internal systems were showing. Jennifer had documented an average bonus trigger rate of approximately 1 in 92 spins across dozens of playing sessions. What makes Jennifer's documentation so valuable is that it confirms what the casino already knew, but didn't advertise. Bull Rush gives players significantly more frequent access to bonus rounds than comparable machines. And from a player psychology standpoint, that changes everything about the experience. Mark explained it to me like this. When you're playing a high volatility machine where bonuses are rare, you're essentially paying an entertainment tax for long stretches of dead spins, waiting and hoping for that one big hit. But when bonuses trigger frequently, even if they're not always massive, you're getting consistent engagement and regular opportunities for significant wins. Your bankroll doesn't drain as quickly during base gameplay because you're not waiting forever between features. Sarah told Mark something else during that conversation, something that really bothered casino management. She said that players who discovered Bull Rush tended to become loyal to it. They'd walk past rows of other machines to get to Bull Rush specifically, and those players, the ones who figured out what Mark was now seeing in the data, they were staying longer but losing less. From an entertainment value perspective, that's exactly what players should want. From a casino revenue perspective, that's a problem. But if you think the trigger frequency is impressive, wait until you hear what former slot technicians revealed about what actually happens during those bonus rounds. Because the mathematics of how Bull Rush bonuses pay out is where this story gets even more interesting. Here's what casino managers discovered that made some of them very unhappy, and it has everything to do with what actually happens once those frequent bonus rounds trigger. Mark told me about a conversation he had with a slot floor analyst named Robert, and what Robert shared explains why Bull Rush's bonus mathematics work so differently from almost every other machine you'll find on a casino floor. Robert had been to an industry conference in Reno, one of those events where game developers, casino executives, and technical staff all gathered to discuss trends and new releases. During a late-night conversation at the hotel bar, Robert ended up talking with a mathematician who'd worked on game development for one of the major slot manufacturers. After a few drinks, this mathematician started talking candidly about design philosophy and specifically about how different machines approach bonus round payouts. According to what this game mathematician told Robert, most modern slot machines follow a specific formula for bonus distribution. They're programmed to deliver a lot of small wins, a moderate number of medium wins, and very few large wins. The technical term is a heavily skewed distribution curve, and it's designed to create excitement from occasional big hits while keeping most bonus rounds relatively modest. This is why you'll frequently trigger a bonus on popular machines like Lightning Link or Buffalo and walk away with 8 times your bet or 12 times your bet, amounts that feel like wins in the moment but barely compensate for the spins you invested to get there. The game mathematician told Robert that this distribution model is intentional because it maximizes house edge while still giving players enough small victories to keep them engaged. But Bull Rush, according to what Robert learned, uses a different mathematical model for its bonus multiplier distribution. Mark said that when Robert came back from that conference and started looking at Bull Rush data with this new perspective, everything clicked into place. The internal documentation that Mark had access to included probability tables, the kind of technical specifications that show exactly how often different outcomes occur. What these tables revealed about Bull Rush was striking. The multiplier distribution during bonus rounds was significantly more balanced than comparable machines. Instead of heavily weighting towards small multipliers with rare large ones, Bull Rush showed a more even spread across small, medium, and large multiplier possibilities. What this means in practical terms is that when you trigger a bonus on Bull Rush, you have a genuinely better chance of hitting a meaningful multiplier, something in the 20 times to 40 times your bet range, compared to machines where those medium to large multipliers are exponentially more rare. Robert had actually done a comparison analysis, putting Bull Rush bonus mathematics side by side with Lightning Link. Mark told me the differences were stark. Lightning Link bonus rounds, according to the internal probability data, show an average return of somewhere between 8 and 15 times the triggering bet. The vast majority of bonuses cluster at the lower end of that range, with only occasional spikes into larger multiplier territory. Bull Rush, by contrast, showed documented average bonus returns between 20 and 40 times the triggering bet, with a much more consistent distribution across that range. Robert's analysis found that Bull Rush bonuses were roughly 2.5 times more valuable on average than Lightning Link bonuses, despite triggering at similar bet levels. Now, this is where a player named David comes into the story, and his experience validates everything the internal data was showing. David was another regular at Mark's casino, and he was meticulous about tracking his play. Unlike Jennifer, who focused mainly on trigger frequency, David kept detailed spreadsheets of actual bonus outcomes over a 6-month period. He recorded every bonus he hit on Bull Rush, what his bet level was, how many multipliers he collected, and what the final payout was. After half a year of documentation across probably 300 bonus rounds, David calculated his average bonus win at 31 times his triggering bet. Mark said David had actually brought this data to the casino host desk one day, not to complain, but just out of curiosity about whether his experience was typical. The host, trying to be diplomatic, told David he was running above average. But Mark knew from the internal data that David's documented experience was almost exactly what the machine was programmed to deliver. Here's the catch, and this is what makes Bull Rush seem almost too good to be true, but actually isn't. The reason Bull Rush can afford these more valuable bonus rounds is directly connected to that higher return to player percentage we talked about earlier. The machine is returning 92 to 94% overall, which means it has more money allocated in its mathematical model to distribute back to players. Instead of concentrating that return into rare massive jackpots like high volatility machines do, Bull Rush spreads it across more frequent, more substantial bonus rounds. It's a completely different design philosophy. You're not chasing the lightning strike 1,000 times your bet hit. You're getting regular 20 to 40 times hits that actually build your bankroll and extend your playing time. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what a former game mathematician told. Mark explains everything about why Bull Rush performs the way it does. The volatility programming, the fundamental mathematical engine that determines how wins and losses distribute over time, that's where Bull Rush separates itself from almost every modern machine on the market. Volatility is one of those terms that gets thrown around in gambling discussions, but most players don't really understand what it means or why it matters so much to their actual experience at a machine. Mark explained it to me in the simplest terms I've ever heard, and once you understand this concept, you'll see why Bull Rush's approach to volatility is exactly what casinos don't want you finding. Volatility, in slot machine terms, describes how wins and losses are distributed over time. It's essentially the mathematical personality of the game. A low volatility machine pays out frequently but in small amounts, keeping you entertained with constant little wins but never really building your bankroll. A high volatility machine is the opposite, long stretches of losses punctuated by occasional large wins. And medium volatility, which is where Bull Rush sits, that's the sweet spot that balances frequent enough wins to sustain your bankroll with the potential for meaningful payouts that actually feel rewarding. Here's why this matters more than almost anything else when you're choosing where to play. Mark told me about a casino host named Michelle who worked the high limit area at his property. And Michelle's job was essentially to keep wealthy players happy and gambling. She had discretion to offer comps, arrange accommodations, provide meals, whatever it took to keep high rollers engaged. But Mark said Michelle told him something fascinating during a slow shift one night. She said that part of her unwritten job description was gently steering players away from certain machines, and Bull Rush was absolutely on that list. When high-value players would wander toward Bull Rush, Michelle would subtly suggest alternatives, usually high-volatility machines like High Limit Lightning Link or Dragon Link. Mark asked her why, and her answer was brutally honest. She said high-volatility machines give the casino a much better chance of significant wins in shorter time periods, while medium volatility machines like Bull Rush allow players to grind longer and more safely. Think about what that means from a mathematical standpoint. When you sit down at a high volatility machine with a $500 bankroll, you're essentially flipping a coin weighted heavily against you. You might hit something significant quickly and walk away a winner, or more likely, you'll watch that 500 disappear in under an hour as you chase bonus triggers that come rarely and often pay modestly despite the long wait. The volatility is working against your bankroll endurance. You're experiencing massive swings, and those swings are exciting, which is exactly why casinos love high volatility machines, but they're devastating to your ability to actually enjoy extended playtime. Bull Rush's medium volatility, by contrast, smooths out those swings. You're still going to have losing sessions. No machine beats mathematics long term, but your money lasts substantially longer and you get far more entertainment value per dollar wagered. Mark told me about a player named Tom who actually tested this principle deliberately, and what Tom discovered through his experiment validated everything the internal data showed. Tom was a semi-retired engineer with both disposable income and the kind of analytical mind that loves testing theories. He decided to run an experiment over 3 months, playing identical $500 sessions on different machines and carefully documenting the results. He'd play Bull Rush one week, then High Limit Lightning Link the next week, then Dragon Link the week after. Always with the same bankroll, always tracking time on device and ending balance. After 12 weeks of this rotation, Tom compiled his data and the results were stark. His average session length on Bull Rush was 3 hours and 47 minutes. On Lightning Link, 2 hours and 12 minutes. On Dragon Link, 1 hour and 53 minutes. But the real revelation in Tom's data wasn't just session length, it was the consistency of outcomes. On Bull Rush, his ending bankroll showed much less variance. He'd finish sessions down $120, down $80, sometimes even slightly ahead. The losses were there, but they were manageable and predictable. On the high volatility machines, his outcomes were all over the spectrum. One session, he'd be up $400. The next session, he'd lose his entire $500 in under 90 minutes. The swings were dramatic, and while he occasionally caught a significant win, the overall trend showed faster bankroll depletion and much less predictable outcomes. Tom told Mark that after finishing his experiment, he'd basically stopped playing anything except Bull Rush, because the entertainment value per dollar was incomparably better. Here's the part that really explains why medium volatility is the player-friendly zone that casinos actively avoid promoting. Mark said that in internal casino discussions about floor layout and machine placement, there's a clear preference for high volatility games and premium positions. The reasons are purely mathematical. High volatility creates emotional intensity, big wins and big losses, and that intensity keeps players making impulsive decisions. It also means that even when players win significantly, they're more likely to keep it playing and give it back because they're chasing that next big hit. Medium volatility doesn't create that same psychological trap. Players on medium volatility machines can think more clearly, they're not riding emotional roller coasters, and they're more likely to walk away when they're ahead because they're not desperately chasing losses or addicted to massive win potential. The industry trend over the past decade has moved aggressively toward higher volatility, and Mark said this wasn't accidental. Game developers discovered that high volatility machines generate more revenue per square foot of casino space, even though individual players lose faster because the psychological hooks are stronger. Players remember the big wins and forget the extended losing streaks. But Bull Rush represents an older design philosophy, one that prioritized player experience and sustainable entertainment over maximum revenue extraction. And that's exactly why some casino managers started questioning whether Bull Rush deserved floor space. But there's one more element former employees revealed that ties all of this together, and it has to do with something most players never even think about when choosing a machine. Several slot technicians told me something about Bull Rush's denomination structure that contradicts everything casinos want you to believe about how these machines work. And when Mark first explained this to me, I had to ask him to repeat it because it seemed almost too player-friendly to be real. But after he walked me through the programming specifications and showed me documentation that compared Bull Rush against virtually every other major slot title on his casino floor, I understood why this particular aspect of the machine made management so uncomfortable. Because denomination selection, the choice between playing pennies versus nickels versus quarters, that decision has massive implications for your return to player percentage on most machines. And the industry has spent decades programming that relationship to heavily favor the casino. Bull Rush breaks that pattern in a way that fundamentally changes the game. Here's what you need to understand about how denomination typically affects your odds. On most slot machines, the return to player percentage varies significantly based on what denomination you're playing. Mark told me that internal specifications for popular games like Buffalo Diamond show RTP variances of 4 to 8 percentage points between penny denomination and quarter denomination. What that means in practical terms is that if you're playing Buffalo Diamond at penny denomination, you might be facing an 85% return to player, but if you bump up to quarter denomination, that same machine might give you 91 or 92%. The casino is literally programming better odds for players who bet more money per spin, and this isn't disclosed anywhere on the machine. You'd never know unless you had access to the technical documentation that Mark reviewed regularly. This denomination penalty hits recreational players the hardest because most people playing slots aren't sitting down with huge bankrolls. They're playing penny or nickel denomination specifically because they want their money to last. They want entertainment value, and they're not trying to chase massive wins. But the cruel irony is that by choosing lower denominations to preserve their bankroll, they're actually playing against significantly worse odds. It's a hidden tax on smaller budget players, and according to Mark, it's completely intentional. Casino operators know that high rollers playing quarters or dollars are going to generate revenue regardless, so those denominations can afford slightly better RTP. But the penny players, the ones feeding a few $100s into machines, over the course of an evening, those players get hit with the worst mathematics the machine offers. Now here's where Bull Rush becomes genuinely different, and Mark said this is documented in internal memos that casino operations staff circulated when they were evaluating the machine's performance. Bull Rush shows minimal RTP variance across denominations. The technical specifications Mark reviewed indicated that the difference between penny play and quarter play on Bull Rush was approximately 1 to 2 percentage points maximum. Compare that to the 4 to 8 point variance on most competing titles, and you're looking at a completely different mathematical landscape. What this means is that a recreational player sitting down at Bull Rush with $200 to play pennies is facing almost the same return to player percentage as someone betting quarters. The denomination penalty that punishes smaller players on virtually every other machine is almost non existent on Bull Rush. Mark told me about a former slot technician named James who actually worked for the manufacturer before transitioning to casino floor operations. And James had reviewed the programming specifications directly during his time on the manufacturing side. According to James, the decision to minimize denomination variance on Bull Rush was a deliberate design choice, part of that same player-friendly philosophy we've been talking about. Most game developers program significant denomination variance because casinos demand it. They want to incentivize higher denomination play, and they want to extract maximum revenue from penny players who might not know any better. But the developers behind Bull Rush apparently pushed back against that model, at least on this particular title, and created a structure that gave penny players a fair shake. There's a player named Angela who discovered this advantage completely by accident, and her story illustrates exactly why this denomination fairness matters. Angela was a regular at Mark's Casino, usually playing penny denomination across various machines, because she was on a fixed income and wanted her entertainment budget to stretch. She'd typically play Buffalo, Lightning Link, sometimes Dragon Link, always at penny denomination, and she'd noticed over months of play that her money seemed to disappear faster than she expected, even when she was hitting bonuses with a reasonable frequency. One evening, another player sitting next to her suggested she try. Bull Rush mentioned something about it playing differently. Angela switched over, kept playing penny denomination, because that's what her budget allowed, and immediately noticed the difference. Her bankroll lasted longer, bonuses felt more rewarding, and her sessions became substantially more enjoyable. After a few weeks of playing Bull Rush exclusively, Angela actually approached a casino host and asked if there was something different about that particular machine, because her experience had improved so dramatically. The host gave her a vague answer about game design, but Mark overheard the conversation and later explained to Angela what was really happening. She was finally playing a machine where her choice of penny denomination wasn't being punished with dramatically worse odds. For the first time, she had access to essentially the same mathematical structure as players betting significantly more per spin. Angela told Mark this changed her entire approach to playing slots because she realized how badly she'd been disadvantaged on every other machine she'd touched. But here's the secondary benefit that makes this denomination fairness even more valuable. And it's something that James explained to Mark during a technical discussion. On most machines, not only does RTP vary by denomination, but line selection can also create penalties. Some games reduce RTP if you're not playing maximum lines, adding another hidden tax on players trying to manage their bets carefully. Bull Rush, according to the specifications James reviewed, maintains consistent RTP regardless of line selection within denomination. You could play penny denomination with 20 lines or 40 lines, and you're facing the same return to player percentage. That flexibility is almost unheard of on modern slots, where every decision point seems designed to punish players who don't bet maximum everything. Mark said there's one more thing that former employees revealed about Bull Rush, and this final piece of information explains why some casinos have actually removed this machine from their floors entirely. And when you hear the reason, you'll understand that it validates everything we've discussed. Because when a casino makes the decision to pull a machine, it's never random. It's always about the numbers, and what those numbers revealed about Bull Rush tells you exactly whose side this machine is really on. A former casino manager told me that Bull Rush was removed from 3 properties he oversaw, and the reason why tells you everything you need to know about whose interests this machine actually serves. His name is Richard, and Mark connected me with him after our conversations about Bull Rush performance data became increasingly focused on this one critical question. If this machine is so popular with players, why do some casinos choose to get rid of it? Richard spent 11 years in slot operations management, overseeing machine selection, floor layout, and performance optimization across multiple properties in the Midwest. When I asked him directly about Bull Rush removal decisions, he didn't hesitate. He said the machine was removed from his floors because it consistently underperformed revenue expectations despite generating significant player traffic and extended playtime. Let me explain what Richard meant by that, because this is where everything we've discussed comes into sharp focus. Casino management tracks a metric called win per unit per day, and it's essentially the amount of profit each machine generates over a 24-hour period. This number determines everything about whether a machine keeps its spot on the floor or gets replaced by something more lucrative. According to Richard, Bull Rush was consistently generating win per unit numbers that ranked in the bottom 15% of machines in its category. Players loved it. People sought it out specifically. Sessions ran long with high time on device metrics, but the actual revenue the casino extracted was substantially lower than comparable games occupying the same square footage. Richard told me that during quarterly reviews, Bull Rush would come up repeatedly as a problem machine from a profitability standpoint. Here's what makes this so significant. The reason Bull Rush underperformed wasn't because players weren't using it. Engagement was actually above average, but because of everything we've talked about throughout this discussion. The 92 to 94% return to player, the frequent bonus triggers every 80 to 100 spins, the balanced multiplier distribution delivering 20 to 40 times average bonus wins, the medium volatility allowing extended bankroll endurance, the denomination fairness eliminating the penalty on penny players. All of these player-friendly features added up to one undeniable mathematical reality for the casino. Bull Rush was returning too much money to players and keeping too little for the house. Richard said management looked at the numbers and saw a machine that generated entertainment value and player satisfaction, but failed to maximize revenue per square foot of casino space. The decision to remove Bull Rush from Richard's properties wasn't made lightly. He told me there were legitimate concerns about player reaction because regular customers had specifically requested that machine and built their casino visits around playing it. But ultimately, the revenue numbers won the argument. Richard's superiors determined that replacing Bull Rush with higher volatility, lower RTP alternatives would generate between 18 and 24% more profit from the same floor space over a 12-month period. So Bull Rush was pulled, and in its place went machines with 86 to 88% return to player, bonus triggers every 150 to 200 spins, and heavily skewed multiplier distributions that kept most bonus wins in that 8 to 15 times range. The new machines generated more revenue for the casino, but players got substantially worse entertainment value for their money. Now here's the paradox that Richard openly acknowledged. Even while he was removing Bull Rush from his floors for business reasons, he personally understood why players preferred it. He told me that if he were sitting down to play slots with his own money, knowing what he knows about machine mathematics and casino operations, Bull Rush would be high on his list of choices. Because from a pure entertainment value proposition, from a getting the most playtime and bonus action per dollar wagered perspective, Bull Rush delivers something increasingly rare in modern slot design. It treats players less like resources to be extracted and more like customers to be entertained. That design philosophy, which Richard said represents an older era of game development, before analytics and optimization became so aggressive, is exactly why the machine struggles to meet contemporary casino revenue expectations. What this proves is perhaps the most important thing you can understand about slot machine selection. When casinos actively dislike a machine despite strong player interest, when management meetings include discussions about whether that machine deserves floor space, even though people specifically seek it out, when the decision gets made to remove it purely because it's not extracting enough profit, that tells you whose side the machine is on. Bull Rush underperforms for casinos precisely because it performs better for players. The mathematical structure that makes it less profitable for the house, that same structure makes it more valuable for anyone actually sitting down to play. So let's recap everything former casino employees revealed about why Bull Rush stands apart. First, the return to player percentage running between 92 and 94%, documented in internal reports that showed consistent underperformance from the casino's perspective. Second, bonus trigger frequency averaging once every 80 to 100 spins, compared to industry standards of 150 to 200, giving players nearly twice as many bonus opportunities per session. Third, bonus mathematics that deliver average wins between 20 and 40 times the triggering bet through more balanced multiplier distribution, roughly 2.5 times more valuable than comparable machines. Fourth, medium volatility programming that extends bankroll endurance and provides 3 to 4 hour average sessions instead of the 90-minute to 2-hour sessions, typical of high volatility alternatives. Fifth, denomination structure that maintains minimal RTP variance across penny, nickel, and quarter play, eliminating the hidden tax that punishes smaller budget players on virtually every other machine. And sixth, the casino removal trend that proves when management looks at the numbers, they see a machine that favors players too much to justify the floor space. Here's the bigger picture that ties all of this together. The slot industry has spent the past 15 years optimizing machines for maximum revenue extraction, using player psychology research, volatility manipulation, and denomination penalties to ensure every square foot of casino floor generates peak profitability. Bull Rush represents a different era and a different philosophy, one where player entertainment value and fair mathematical structure weren't considered obstacles to profit, but rather the foundation of sustainable business. That philosophy is disappearing from casino floors, replaced by games that prioritize house edge optimization above all else. Which means that finding and playing Bull Rush while it's still available isn't just about choosing a better machine. It's about accessing a design approach that may not survive the next generation of slot development. This isn't about beating the casino. No machine overcomes mathematical edge in the long term, but it's about informed choice. It's about understanding that when former slot technicians, floor supervisors, and casino managers all acknowledge that one particular machine consistently performs better for players, even as they discuss removing it for business reasons, you should pay attention. If this information changed how you think about slot selection, hit that subscribe button because there's more insider knowledge coming. Drop a comment and let me know. Will you seek out Bull Rush next time you're on a casino floor? And stay informed, play smarter, and remember that the only real edge you have is knowledge that casinos would prefer you didn't possess.